talk, and the title of his talk is this: if you cannot run with men, how then can you run with horses? Brother Malaspina.
Well, that does sound a bit humorous, and we'll see as we go along. First of all, we would like to mention that when we think of the brothers of the past, the pre-Christian prophets, the apostles, or some of those that Jehovah has used in a very mighty way, the tendency is to think of them as men who were superhuman. But they were not. They were people that were like you and I. They were young at one time, and then they enjoyed the vigor of youth, and then when they got older, they got sick. They probably even had arthritis, called it some other name, but nevertheless, they were men that were just like you are. And they were faithful women like you, sister. They were the same kind. They loved Jehovah as you do, and they kept their relationship with God the same way that you do and as you cherish it. But there were times when these men or these women would observe things and they would have a complaint to make. And when they did, they knew who to go to with a complaint. And I'm sure that you do too. It doesn't do any good for us to observe something that may occur, or things we see in the world, and to merely complain to one another because we can't do too much about it. So in the case of Jeremiah, for example, he observed something. He had a special assignment from Jehovah, and in this special assignment he observed things, and so he approached Jehovah. So we hope we follow this standard ourselves, that when we have something that we want to call to Jehovah's attention, that we do it. Now, if you'll turn to the 12th chapter of Jeremiah, I think you appreciate this. And there in the 12th verse, the 12th chapter, the very first verse, you'll notice something there that is quite striking and very similar to what Jehovah's Witnesses do when they approach Jehovah. They do it with respect and recognition of His authority. Now notice what he says there. He says, "You are righteous, O Jehovah." Now the very fact that he says Jehovah is righteous helps us to appreciate immediately the kind of complaint he had. It was a judicial complaint, wasn't it? Because he was here referring to a God who sets up righteous standards for people to live by. So he said, "Jehovah, you're righteous, and now no, when I make my complaint to you." Now he had something here that he wanted to call to Jehovah's attention. Think of that. And there are times when we feel that way. We do it very respectfully, recognizing our inferiority to Jehovah, and recognizing His supremacy, that we are merely dust here upon the earth in comparison to Him, and that really, as imperfect people, we cannot keep, like we would like, His righteousness. So it makes it difficult for us to judge certain matters. So he says, "Now, I have a complaint. I'm going to bring it to your attention." He said, "When I speak even about matters of judgment with you." Now he wanted something that Jehovah could settle. Because he had not only the authority, he also had the power to do it, and the ability to get it done. Well, now, what was his complaint? He says, "Why is it the way of the wicked ones is what has succeeded?" Isn't that kind of a familiar thing with all of us, really? Some of us, we say that. We use little different words sometimes, or at least we've heard them. We say, "Why is it the person, the worse he is, the better off he seems to be?" See, that's what Jeremiah was saying there. He says they're unworried. They don't worry about the bad things they do. Now, how different that is from you. You do some little thing, and it just bothers you to no end, and you can't hardly wait till you get on your knees and beg forgiveness. But not with them. They don't care. They do whatever they want. Tomorrow they do more. They become callous to the things they do. But now in verse 2, he's talking about a specific people. He says, you have planted them. Now, you see who he's talking about there? He's talking about God's own people. Now, once in a while, we may find something wrong with the world on the outside. We can discuss that amongst ourselves, not judging the situation, but we observe it. Now, here he was dealing with something that belonged to God. So he went right to God with it, didn't he? And that's the way we should treat our complaints too, should we not? Well, what's he say about God's people at that time? He says, they keep going ahead. They have also produced fruit. You are near in their mouth. In other words, he says, they're always saying, you know, Jehovah's good, Jehovah's nice, Jehovah will soon establish this, and he will bring about righteousness. You're always talking well about Jehovah. The lips are always giving out this kind of information. Now notice what he says. Far away from the kidneys. The kidneys, we don't have to be medical people. We don't have to know too much about human anatomy to realize that the kidneys are set in the body in a very recessed area, hard to get to. They're protected. So what he was saying there, that really the kidneys represented the real person, what he is on the inside, the motive of the person, personality. Now he says they talk well about you, but their personality is completely different. That's kind of a nice way to put the word there, put the description there of a hypocrite. Isn't that true? Saying one thing but acting another way. Well, Jehovah isn't saying a word, is he? You don't see anything here of Jehovah's response. He doesn't say anything. Jeremiah's talking. You know why? Jehovah never interrupts our prayer. He allows us to speak whatever is in our hearts. And then, in due time, he gives us the answer, one way or another. So in verse 3, he goes on, and he's very fair, this man Jeremiah, this servant of God. He says, and you yourself, O Jehovah, know me well. Well, Jehovah did know him well. He knew him when he was conceived. That's how well he knew him. And he says, you have examined my heart and you knew yourself. Now, wasn't that a fair way of registering a complaint? He said, now these people are thus and so, but I'm not leaving myself out. He says, examine my heart. Now, brothers, that's what it's going to come to, isn't it? You and I and people everywhere who claim to be Jehovah's people, the time will come when Jehovah will judge us according to our motives, according to what our heart is like. So we must be ourselves. Now in this case, Jeremiah says, here it is, examine. Well, that's real close scrutiny, isn't it? When you examine something, it makes Jehovah the examiner. Well, now, after he puts that to Jehovah, then he expresses himself with indignation. And he says, single them out like sheep for the slaughtering and set them apart for the day of killing. Why? Did you do a thing like that? He did. Well, he knew that Jehovah would never, never answer that unless it was right. So he could do it. Oh, sometimes when you say, I wonder how long these people are going to get away with it, well, ask Jehovah to take care of that getting away part. Don't you be concerned with that. He knows when to do it at the right time. But make sure your heart is right at all times. That's what's going to give us life. That heart must be in view with Jehovah's standards. Otherwise, we'll never make it. Never going to make it. Well, he says, set them apart for the day of killing. My, he wanted it over with, didn't he? He wanted it over with. I mean, he didn't want anybody to be spared there. And still Jehovah doesn't answer, but now here in verse 4 it says, how long should the land keep withering away and the very vegetation of all the fields dry up? Jeremiah is asking Jehovah a question. Doesn't that remind you of some people today who claim to be Christians and yet are so greedy? They, for whatever they can get out of it, they destroy the land and cause places to become desert-like, others overrun by floodwaters because of the erosion of the soil. And then he says here, because of the badness of those dwelling in it, he says the beasts and the flying creatures have been swept away. He says they're so bad that the creatures that you have created, the animals, the birds, they won't even leave them in peace. And aren't there people like that today? There are some people, they can't stand to see a bird perched in a tree. They have to throw stones at it. Well, they have to shoot them. Well, they can't stand to see a dog run down the street, even though some now become very vicious because they've been trained to become vicious. Yet they try to destroy them. And some people, just to have something a little different to wear or to keep in some refrigerated place because they can't wear it due to the geographical location they live in, they will pay thousands of dollars just to take the skin off the leather. And so today, flying creatures, animals, they say that there are at least 3 species of animals that are becoming extinct every day because of greed. Well, Jeremiah had a real complaint back there, and it seems like we have one today. Look at their attitude there in that verse. It says, for they have said, he does not see our future. Callous completely. Now it's like Jeremiah pausing here, and Jehovah now, he answers. Now look at the way he answers. Because with footmen you have run, they would tire you out. How then can you run a race with horses? There's the theme. But the theme is in a very serious setting, isn't it? Extremely so. Very thought-provoking setting. Now, I'm sure you can decipher that, can't you? You can understand that, can't you? This is Jehovah answering Jeremiah. He's saying to Jeremiah in so many words. He says, Jeremiah, you're tired of it all, aren't you? You're discouraged, aren't you? You're depressed, my servant. I know by the way you are complaining. You find it very intolerable. You can't take it, can you? So he says, if you cannot run with men, these are just men. This is the common people. This is the populace. If you cannot run with those, how then can you run with horses? Horses, mighty, strong, courageous, much mightier than man. What does a man have against a horse when it comes to strength? So he says, if you can't take that down, Jeremiah, what are you going to do when things get big? That's what he said. Well, now, Jehovah's not allowing Jeremiah to do too much more talking here because he had said what was in his heart. And so Jehovah continues, and he says, in the peace, are you confident? How will you act among the proud thickets along the Jordan? Well, all of you know the Jordan is a river over there in the Bible lands. Goes through that country, ends up in the Dead Sea. And along that river, as it snakes through the country, there are thickets, greenery, vegetation that goes along the side. And so the animals would go there, and that would be their habitat. Now, who are the proud ones? Well, literally, that would be the lion. He's the proud one of the animal family, isn't he? And So he would go there for what? Kill, eat. That's what he would do. So now, was Jeremiah, that is, was Jehovah here talking to Jeremiah about animals? Of course not. He was making an illustration there. He was painting a picture there that Jeremiah would understand with regards to who these proud ones are. Well, he was saying, Jeremiah, you can't take the abuse. You can't take that. You see the lack of concern for doing wrong. You find people indifferent to my message going from your lips to them. You find people that are apathetic about what you're saying, so now you're depressed about all of that. And you want me to slaughter them. You want me to set a day, kill them all. That's what you want, don't you? Yet, these proud ones have not come against you yet. You're just dealing with men. You have not run a race against the mighty ones. Now, who are the mighty ones back there? Well, back there, the princes of Benjamin, the princes of Judah, they were whipping up warfare, so the proud ones had to be the king, the elders, and the prophets. Those were the big ones, because they controlled things. So Jeremiah wasn't up against these yet, was he? Now, how do we make application to that situation back there, right here in your own congregation? How do we do that? Well, you know, there's so many commendable things about your congregation. That would take up all my time talking about that. But the organization loves you as individuals, and we want to bring a few things to your attention. You know that we do not tickle the ears of people, don't you? You know that. That would allow you to let your protection down, your defenses down, and you would not be able to continue running the race. But just to make an application or two, and if it fits, fine. If it doesn't, take it as good counsel. Something preventative. For example, here in your congregation, you have 100 publishers. That's a goodly-sized congregation. 100 people working in a small area like you have, everyone active, that's quite a congregation. But of those 100 people, there are 20 that are irregular publishers. Now you say, well, how does that fit in with that prophecy? Well, aren't they giving out, running with men? Something getting in the way? Have the big ones come against Jehovah's organization yet? Have the religions of the world exerted all their pressure against Jehovah by means of moving politicians and the military against Jehovah's people? Have they done that yet? Not in this country. Some countries we've had little spurts of that, and it's been very, very difficult for our brothers. Just to mention the Soviet Union and Cuba and China and Malawi and those kind of places. Our brothers really had to run a race against horses there, didn't they? Some of our brothers were beheaded for the truth. That's running a race against the mighty ones, is it not? We haven't had much of that here. And yet, we find some in the congregation, something getting in the way. They said to Jehovah, what you want me to do, they said in their dedication, that I will do. And now something happened. Well, maybe it's justifiable. We don't know. Who are we to judge that? Only God can do that. So we dare not do that ourselves. But wouldn't it be wise, for those of you who are sitting here, who serve Jehovah a month and then miss a whole month or two, to examine yourself and ask yourself, am I just running a race with men and giving out? How will you ever run against the horses? How will you ever do that? Couldn't do it. You just would not be strong enough to do it. You know why? Because your service is a symptom of whether your spirituality is strong or weak. And if your spirituality is strong, you're going to overcome the obstacles and you're going to be regular in God's service. If your spirituality is waning, then it's going to show up in your service because you're going to replace your service with other, whatever it may be. So we appeal to you, dear people, examine yourself. Allow Jehovah to examine your heart, as it was in the case of Jeremiah. And since Jehovah has said to you, I will give you everlasting life, and you said, whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do it. You dedicated your life to do that. Now why not run the race? Why give in now that you're so close? There was one person in your congregation that became inactive. That person just quit altogether the race. Now if you're sitting here, whoever you may be, I hope you are. We love you very dearly. We're trying to call something to your attention. If you get life, it only makes us happy. It doesn't enhance us in any way. It doesn't give us any extra. You're the one that gets life. We want you to have it in all its perfection. We want you to welcome back the dead. We don't want you to be amongst the dead. So we appeal to you. Think of your situation. You made God a promise. You gave him your word. What would you think of Jehovah if he went back on his word? He has promised our brothers who have fallen in death faithfully a resurrection. Now he changes his mind. What would you think of a God like that? Not too much, really. We at least can keep our word. Rich, poor, makes no difference. Our word is our bond. That's what we are. When we say yes, it's yes. When we say no, it's no. In our dedication, we say yes. So we hope that when help is extended to you, who are irregular in Jehovah's service, who are inactive, please accept it. Now, during this week, in talking to the elders of your congregation, a program was outlined that these brothers have said yes to. They gave their word. They're going to be calling on all families repeatedly, not because you have problems, but because they must shepherd the flock of God. Some of you may have some difficulties in your service. They're going to help you. That's what they're going to call for. So they'll be calling on you about every 5 weeks. Receive them well. There's that respect for the glorious one, isn't it? Receive them well. Give them 20 minutes of your time. Well, now, in another area, and it becomes a little more serious, as you know, there are some people, it's hard for me to understand this, but anyway it happens, whether you're young or old. But sometimes a traveling brother who represents the governing body comes in the congregation. You find that somebody has been disfellowshipped. Somebody has been put on reproof, whether it be public or private. And then when you investigate the situation, you find out that it's for something like immorality or things of this nature. It's hard for us to understand. We don't know what goes wrong. What goes wrong when a person does things like that? We know the world is perhaps inviting to some, but the truth never changes. Jehovah is holy. He says, you must be holy as I am holy. But these people prefer not to be. When a person is disfellowshipped, brothers, it isn't that we have concocted something to get them out. No, an accusation or a confession has been brought about. A judicial committee has been formed. Hard work has been put into research to try to help that person to present works that befit repentance. But that person who is disfellowshipped, when you hear the word disfellowship, that person brazenly wants to continue the course they're doing. And so they become a threat to you marvelous sisters, your children, your families. So what do we have to do? We have to put them out. Why does that happen? How can a person come to know the truth and then fall into a situation like that and want to keep doing it? We can understand how a person gets into a situation and is very sorry for what he's done, and he presents works before repentance. But someone that has known Jehovah, known what Jesus has done in his behalf, turns around, walks on the blood of Jesus Christ, tramples on it in the mud and muck of this world, and wants to keep doing it. Isn't that hard to understand? Very difficult, isn't it? These people were running the race. They'll never make it. Not in that state. When the mighty ones come against them, they're already out. If they stay in that situation, the great tribulation will come. We hope that. We hope that when you are tempted with something wrong, that you think, would Jesus Christ do this? How much do I value his blood? He died for me when I was no good in the first place. So we hope that never happens. There was a young couple. Well, they weren't married. They were brother and sister. And it was in a congregation not too far from me. Father's a fine man, like you brothers are. Loved his family, and he should. You should too, and I'm sure you would. And these two children were, you might say, raised in the truth. He did everything for these children. Now they're about 18 to 20 years old. One day the father's sitting in the meeting, and they make an announcement that these two children are disfellowshipped. Well, father couldn't hardly take that. He couldn't figure out how could his children do that. And then when he talked to his children, they didn't care anymore about it. They wanted to do it. He just couldn't get over that. And he grieved over that. And one day that man had a massive heart attack and he died. Those two children killed their father. Oh yes, they killed their father. They may be out there in the world, time seems to heal some of those things. But Jehovah will bring them to account. They will get away. They must answer to Jehovah for that. They killed their father. Do you young children want to do that? Why is it that some young ones cause premature death to their parents? Why? A parent goes through 18 years of raising a child, does everything possible to do for that child. All he gets out of it is that you are now a dedicated servant of God. That's all he'll ever get out of it. And his good name is not destroyed. It's not blemished. Some children, they never think of that. Never enters their mind. And it causes the parents premature cancer, heart attacks, all these kind of horrible diseases. They keep living for a little while. The father's sick or dead, and the mother is gone. Just hard to figure out. And sometimes we say, you know why they do that? There's a lot of pressures on the young people. Sure, there's pressure. We find that. A few years ago, a man would work 11, 12, 13 hours a day to provide for his family. Some of these men would come from another country, they couldn't speak the language. And they'd work day and night and take all the abuse of an oppressive employer just to bring bread in and put it on the table. That's pressure. And who's the young man? Many young people today don't know that kind of pressure. There are some young people today, they marry, for example. They get married. After the day they get married, they want to have what their parents worked 30 years for. They want it that one night. They got to have the house, they got to have the car, it's got to be a new one. They got to have the house full of furniture. Well, if you can afford it, fine. Great. We hope that you can have better than your dad had. Why do you have to go in debt? Why does a person have to go in debt for a young person for a new car? There's nothing wrong with a new car. Oh, I love this smell of a new car myself. Oh, it's nice. Like to ride in a new car over an old car. I like that. But if you can't afford it, should you go in debt for that? Now what happens when you go in debt? Well, you give out in the race with men, don't you? Now you have to become a slave to the one you owe your money to. You have to work. You have to provide for him. Why should you go in debt for $7,000, $8,000 for a new car? All you get in exchange for that debt is about 6,000 pounds of plastic nuts. That's all you get. You don't get any more than that. Now, did I condemn a new car? No, I didn't. Did I say you couldn't have it? I'm just saying don't go in debt for it, because if you do, you're going to slow down in your race. And when the mighty ones come against you, you'll never make it. You just won't make it. I knew a couple of girls, pioneers, right here in San Francisco. Back in 1942, they were pioneering there. They had an old car. It was old. It was so old they called it Cornelius. They used to push that car. At night they'd leave it right up on a hill, so the next morning they'd push it down to start. But it was paid for. Yeah, it was their car. It was paid for. People would laugh at it. Look at the old car those two nice-looking girls had. But they kept pioneering that car. They kept working with it. So he who laughs last laughs the last. Those girls were good girls. They still are good girls. They became people who knew how to make decisions. Now, if you're young and you're contemplating marriage, it's not bad. One time I was giving a talk. It was quite interesting to me anyway. The Bible doesn't say you can't get married at 13 or 14. It doesn't say that a young person has to marry an old decrepit old man, or an old decrepit old man can't have a young woman. It doesn't say that at all. It doesn't forbid marriage. The point here is, what's the hurry? What's the hurry in getting married? Now, if you're young, wouldn't it be best to go through high school if you can, be very diligent in your studies, be different than most people in the school. Stand out. You carry the vessel of Jehovah. You're one of Jehovah's people. Stand out as the best student, the best in everything you can do. And then go along with the encouragement of your parents. Your Christian parents will not encourage you to be some kind of a top factory worker, a top office worker, a managerial job. They'll tell you, get into the full-time service. It'll make a real woman, a real man of you. Now, don't tell me I don't know, because I know. I've done that. I've gone that route. Sometimes young ones say he doesn't know. They think I was born like this. I was a little baby, just like you were. Believe it or not, I grew. Not too much, but I did. So I know. And I know you're thinking, too, because I used to think the same way. That old guy doesn't know anything. That's the way a young mind works for a little while. And all of a sudden, you wonder what happened. So why should you get married so young? Why don't you get into the full-time? Why don't you put Gilead up ahead of you, or Bethel service, the circuit work, or something like that? Why don't you be able to make a man and woman out of you right away? And then you can pick some system that thinks the way you do. And when you're married, usually there's adjustments to make. You know, you put two people together, a man and a woman, they're right there, they're different. Man and woman. Then you take one that's from this type of environment and genetic makeup, and you take another one from the opposite. You put them together, all of a sudden you got discussions that come up that you don't agree. But when you have the full-time service, you learn how to save pennies, you learn how to make your own decisions, you learn how to be tolerant and understanding, and you have insight, you can make those adjustments. Not like some young people. The first discussion they have, well, I'm going to go on away. Grow up and be real Christian men and women. I'm sure your parents have been telling you these same things. There's a scripture in the Bible that I'd like to read for you. Here in 1 Timothy chapter 2. 1 Timothy chapter 2. Or 2 Timothy, I'm sorry. And notice what it says there in verse 20. It's very clear. It says, now in a large house, that's Jehovah's congregation, there are vessels, those are people vessels, not only of gold and silver, those are the Christian qualities, the high standard qualities, gold, silver. Those are very fine minerals, metals. But he says in that same house, there's also wood and earthenware. See, those are inferior, those are not so good. But they're in the same house. And he says, others for a purpose some for an honorable purpose, but others for a purpose lacking honor. In other words, Jehovah will use some, but he won't use them in the same house. So then, we have to ask ourselves, young or old, whatever the case might be, which one of these materials are we? Are we gold or are we silver? You're the only one to tell them. Gold knows, of course, as far as the earth is concerned. One way you can tell what your qualities are: a fleshly mind always thinks of material things, always talks of material things. The abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. You can't get around it. Isn't that true at your work? You men who tell me you're at work, all you hear people talk about is what? Women and money. See, that's the kind of people they are. That's a fleshly mind. You get around people that are spiritual, they're always thinking of spiritual things. So that's how you know whether you're a vessel for an honorable work or you're one lacking honor. We hope that you're one for an honorable work. Jehovah wants to use you. He wants you to be a fellow worker with him. So we hope that you brothers will consider some of these things and run the race that's set before you. I want to tell you something. Would you let me tell you something? Or are you too hungry? You want to go home? You want to go home? Go. I'm going to tell you anyway. I don't know if any of you have lived in the Tascadero. I love to tell this. Anyway, the Tascadero is a little town down here in just near Paso Robles. I had a circus there. We used to steal the brother. There's a brother down there. Bless his heart. His name is McClure. And Brother McClure got sick. And so we were going through there, and somebody said to us, did you know Brother McClure is very sick? How sick? Very sick. He'll die. We'd love to see you. We'd love to see you, brother. I said, okay, I'll go. We don't go see people in the hospital just because somebody tells us to go. We appreciate the reminder, of course. How would we know? We go because we want to. If someday you and I are lying in the hospital, don't you hope, and don't I hope somebody comes and sees us? We love that. Well, anyway, I got there and asked where he was, and he said he's in that room. And so I went in the room. There's a little old man in bed there, and I looked there. He got the wrong room, walked out again. I said, say, you must have given me the wrong instruction. Brother, Mr. McClure. That's him. That's McClure? Went back in and looked at him. Now this man, you got to appreciate, used to weigh about 230 pounds. Now he was down to about 70. And he had a malignancy, cancer. And the doctor said it was so unusual that tumors grew on every part of his body. Everything. And there was no sedative that could relax that part. So imagine the pain. So I bent over McClure, and it was in his throat too, and he could barely talk. And I said, Brother McClure, we want to do something for you. Please tell us what we can do. You know, it's not good to say to somebody, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. Who's going to let you know? But anyway, we asked him. And he tried to get up. He did hard, he bent up, he mustered all his strength. And I said, no, you want to get up and talk in my ear? And he says, brother, he says, you see that little girl down the hallway? There was a girl down there, one of these that cleans pots and pans and changes the beds and things like this. I forget what you call those in the hospital, but anyway, she looked at me. He says, brother, she loves the truth. I placed a book with her. Please follow that. Please. Would you do that? Would you give me a woman? Please. He says, of course, brother. Just laid back, relaxed, tears come down the side of his face. And Brother McClure died. That girl, oh yes, it was followed up. We sure of that. She's associating her husband who once was thought we were all crazy. He's going to be involved. What a surprise Brother McClure is going to have on his back. But let me ask you this. Was Brother McClure running with men or was he running with horses? What was he doing? Did he have his mind full? All the brothers are in laughter, enjoying the meetings, enjoying their associations, eating together, knee full of cancer. Why? He wasn't doing that. That little girl was on his mind. There's a vessel for an honorable purpose right there. There's your gold and silver. Want to hear another one? You know, once in a while you'll see a very beautiful person. I mean, the features. I know you're all nice-looking people. I know that. I don't want to say you're not. Who am I to say that? But anyway, I would imagine, just my imagination, if Adam were to come back and he saw what we looked at, what we looked like, he won't come back. If he saw what we looked like, he just dropped dead again. Because he knew what a beautiful person looked like. He says, "Oh, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh." Oh, she's a beautiful woman. And nowadays, as the 6,000 years later, it's like a rose bush. You know, a rose bush that usually gives off a beautiful rose, one more before it dies. Sometimes it'll do. Well, this sister had that kind of a face. Oh, she was beautiful. You know, you couldn't help but look at it. You just had to do it. She just had beautiful. Always had every hair in place. Anyway, here's the way she would do from her home. She would sit in her home, and in the window, she'd stay in the window, and it looked just like a picture in the window. That's why I described her face, so you can appreciate the picture. And there was a lot of foot traffic in front of the house, people going to work. And so when she'd see somebody look up there, and they'd take another look, she would whistle at them. It's good for a woman to whistle, and it's worse yet if the sister turns around and says, isn't it? Right. And so the man would see that woman whistle. He was up there just that fast. He'd forget everything. Lunchbox. So when he'd get up there, the first thing that sister would say, she'd say, "You know, I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I apologize for this thing. I know a lady should not do that. I'm not the kind of a person that one would think I am by this thing. But you see, I don't have any legs." And so then she'd start witnessing. And the brother, who was a cabinet maker, carpenter or something, he made her something very unique down here. She knew just where everything was without even looking down at the books, magazines, and so on. And she witnessed to the guys like that. Now, here was a beautiful woman. Was she running with men? Or was she running with bushes? With horses. She could sit in that house and say, "Look, I can't even move on this house. And if I go on the street, I become a spectacle to everybody. Everybody says, 'Look at that beautiful woman with no legs.'" She wasn't thinking that way. She had her mind on the truth. She knew one of these days those legs would sprout out there just like fast. And she would leap around like a deer. Sometimes we get so concerned with ourselves that we give up in this race. We put other things in its place. Do you know that little Greek brother that used to be in San Francisco, Andy Wisconsin? Who doesn't know Andy Wisconsin? Beautiful close. Now he's in heaven. I hope I'm getting all the right details, Andy. But I loved Andy very much. I served that congregation. And the last time I saw him was about 92. He was a very sick man, full of arthritis. And he had a place there on the market, Paul Street. And he had a couple of tables out there on the street. And he put on an old overcoat because it's cold. And he'd be there. He wasn't much to look at. 92 years old, he had one tooth. And it was all gold. And every time he smiled, he'd give me that tooth. And it just sparkled. He looked beautiful to me. But he was all full of arthritis, all crippled up. He'd sit on that street corner, sit in a chair behind that table. 10 hours, 8 hours. And I checked his records. He placed 800 to 900 to 1,000 magazines a month. And that street corner. 60, 70 books. So I thought, I'll go down there. You know how your selfishness gets the best of you? If he's placing 1,000, I'll be able to place 10 anyways. So I'd stand there, standing. He was sitting, freezing, old man. And people would walk right, put the money in his box, take his magazines, And I thought Andy was sleeping, so I wouldn't say anything. And then I'd look over at him, and there he'd be. He's giving me that tooth, see? He's saying, you tried, huh, brother? That's the way you talk. Brother, you tried, eh? That's what he was. And then the brothers would, one day the banker told me I had to get out of here. So you can't stay here. I said, what? Are you kidding? The bank manager says, you got to go. You're a sight out there with all those folks. This is a bank. What do people think in front of our bank doing that? He says, hey, I certainly know. What is it? That's the sovereign of miracles. He's God. How can you send me away? I've been here for years. If you don't go, we'll call the police, okay? I'll go. And he turned around, he looked at him, he says, you know, I don't know what Jehovah is doing to you. And so he left. And Andy was heartbroken. He didn't know where to go. Where was he going to sit now? Where was he going to carry on his work? What about all these people who took his magazines every 2 weeks, every week? What was he going to do? He was concerned about his ministry. He loved God. You know, it wasn't but a couple of weeks that man died in that bank. Well, Andy didn't know it until somebody said to him, you know the manager down there died? Take me right away. Take me to the bank. So they had to carry him after. So they took him in the bank. He says, I want to speak to the manager. Here he was. He looked, you know, like he didn't have a nickel. Maybe he had more than a bank. I don't know. That's the way he did it. He said, I want to talk to the manager. The manager. So the manager, you know how they are. They look you up and down first. What do you want? He says, you know, I used to be outside there. I used to have my magazines. He went through the whole thing. The man chased me away. He says, I'm a servant of God, the true God. I told him, that's God's property. You should not do that. You see what happened to him? I don't know whether Jehovah had anything to do with that. So he says, I want to get my table back. Go ahead. And he stayed there until he went to heaven. He stayed right there. He died, I understand, recently. That's what I've been told. I'm not sure. But if he's dead, he stayed right there till he was that dear old man. When he was man or when he was did he have his mind on the spiritual things? Now then, when I refer to some of you who are irregular, some of you who are inactive, some of you who are young, was asking for them. Wasn't it good counsel? Isn't that the way you expect from Jehovah's organization? They love you dearly, and that love is backed up with frankness, honesty, instead of just letting you slide until finally you're out of the truth, and you face a horrible life with the world, and finally death. Is that what we should let you do? So we hope these few words will help. You know, I mentioned the big ones are coming against us. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of that. Let me read you something here in the Bible. I know I got to stop here. I'm beginning to get wound up here. But don't continue a course that you know is not right, because verse 6 of chapter 15, Jeremiah, says this. You yourself have deserted me, is the utterance of Jehovah. Backwards is the way you keep walking. I shall stretch my hand against you and bring you to ruin. I have got tired of feeling regret. May Jehovah never feel that way because we're going backwards. May He never get that way with us. We hope that never happens with you. Now what about these big guys that are going to come against us? Whether they be the military or whoever they are. Notice verse 20. I have made you to this people a fortified copper wall. Now if any of you deal with copper, you know it's a very strong metal. If you put flame against it, it just spreads the flame. It's very, very durable metal. So Jehovah compares you to copper, a wall of copper. He says they will certainly fight against you, so they're coming, aren't they? They'll be at us before too long, before the end. But look at this promise from the Almighty One. They will not prevail there. For I am with you to save you and to deliver you, is the utterance of Jehovah. And I will deliver you out of the hand of the bad ones, and I will redeem you out of the palm of the tyrannical ones. So what have you got to worry about? Nothing to worry about. And this final scripture here, which has been a very dear scripture to my little family, which is my wife and I, I'll tell you where it is as soon as I finish reading. Here's what it says. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. So they threaten. Who cares? Let them threaten. Jehovah says, don't be afraid, I'm with you. Do not gaze about. In other words, don't panic. Thinking, oh my, no, the doctor told me this, or the big ones are coming against me, or this or that. Don't worry about it. Don't gaze about it. I am your God. I will fortify you. I will really help you. I will really keep fast hold of you with my right hand of righteousness, just like a big father with a little child, right? Look, all those getting heated up against you will become ashamed and be humiliated. The men in a quarrel with you will become as nothing. They will perish. Isaiah 41, verse 10 and 11. So, brothers, in leaving your congregation, it's been a marvelous week. You're unique people. I never got hugged so much in a long time. I can't even get away from it. Sometimes you wonder why anybody would run away. But you've been very kind. We've enjoyed it. You love the Bible. I can see that. That's the big thing. And now Jehovah will bless you more and more and more as you progress individually and as a congregation. You have the Bible, read it every day. Love one another with intense love. And allow Jehovah to examine your heart. And we are grateful for the elders, the pioneers we have here, and all your young ones. What would a congregation be like without you? Ronald. So it's been a real nice week. We thank you for inviting us to your homes, to have meals with you. We've done so many other nice things. We're very considerate. May Jehovah repay you for your kindness. So we'll see you at the Circuit Assembly, which is very shortly now, in November. I think you're Circuit C, so you'll be going in December. December 4 and 5 is when we go to your assembly. So we'll see you there. And when we see each other, say, hey, Malaspina, how you doing? I'm doing pretty good. How are you? So we love each other, don't we? We're a family. And as I told the elders the other night, for those I had not met before, this is the beginning of an eternal friendship. That's the way I feel about you. We've begun to live together forever. That's a nice feeling. So Jehovah bless. And when you pray, think of us two traveling Jews. Will you do that? If you'd like to rise, we'll sing a song. Those of you who are able to. And we'll sing song number 20.